In listening to your music, one thing comes very clearly to me, and that's admiration for your ability to focus. And I'm wondering how you work towards that and what your view on that topic is.
I think it's not something that I actually try to do. I think it's something that's a result of possibly years of meditation or just getting older and listening and being able to just kind of let go and be in the moment, be in the flow. It's been compared to tuning a string on a violin. If it's too tight, it will break. And if it's too loose, it's not going to work. It has to be just the right tension. So your state of mind it's a similar thing, I think. If you're trying very hard to control, to just be in control, that's like tuning the string too tight. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not just in that sweet spot, it's just about that, I suppose.
Yeah. That makes total sense. And I never thought of it as, with the violin picture. I really like that. Were there people along the way that you got to work with where you had a similar sense for their ability to focus, where you maybe learned something or thought about how they approached this topic?
To be honest, not so much. I haven't thought about that so much. What I think about in relation to the other musicians I play with, if we're doing compositions, I study their compositions and try to figure out how they put things together.
Yeah.
And also, if it seems to be coming from a place that touches me emotionally. In other words, if it's not just an intellectual exercise. Right. If I get the feeling that the human being, are inside that they're playing, that they're playing themselves, really, as opposed to showing off a technique or whatever it is, sounding as much like somebody else as possible. Right. Any of that kind of stuff. Those are the things that I think about. I mean, anybody can be in that focused spot, really. And that violin analogy, I think that's particular meditation analogy, that read. So it's not original with me. I think a lot of it has to do with letting your... It's very hard to put into words.
Sure, yeah.
Not trying to overthink things. I mean, your thinking mind is there operating. It can't not be. It is there. So it's not a matter of saying, stop thinking and just play. It's not that. It's more a matter of not trying to control what's happening with your mind. Because all of the things that you've studied and listened to and experienced in your life are there in your mind, and they are all going to be influencing what you do. And at the same time, you can't just get sleepy. I remember sometimes when I was younger and studying classical music, and I would be playing in a student concert of my teacher or something. And I would be playing the music, but I would be thinking about what I was going to have for dinner and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if I would get lost, if I would be playing a piece from memory and I would get lost, I couldn't find my way back because really I wasn't in a space of attention, you know, to what I was doing.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere between those.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many things that can grab your attention and take your attention away from, the personal stuff, meaning the ego and certain doubts. I mean, that's all connected to the ego. Doubts and as you said before, people you would maybe like to sound like, or you would not like to sound, thoughts like that. I'm sure you've been through different states of
course.
Yeah.
Everybody has.
Yeah.
He has, and I still go through that. But again, I guess just to get back to the meditation analogy, it's not like I'm a super expert in meditation or something, but you're not trying to stop your thoughts. Again, it's not a controlled thing. Thoughts come, all these thoughts will come, and you can let them come and just go by like clouds
yeah,
in the sky. You don't have to grab onto them and make a story out of them. And Andrew Cyril, my friend Andrew Cyril, who I've played with, said when he teaches workshops, he says, "Okay, everybody, leave your ego at the door when you come."
Yeah.
Because, it's normal to worry about those things and worry about how people are seeing you and hearing you. But if you are really being true to what you feel at the moment and what you want to do, that's the thing that's important. I mean, at different times we're all going to sound like somebody else. Everyone has been influenced by other people. You can't be alive without that being true.
Sure, yeah.
And I mean, out of these influences develops your own voice. Some voices are very defined and noticeable and unique, and every voice is unique, and some really change the course of the music. Anthony Braxton says they are few and far between, and he calls them restructuralists.
Right.
So someone like Cecil Taylor will come along, and then a lot of pianists will be influenced by him, and you'll have almost like a school of Cecil Taylor. And they might be they will be slightly different, all this. But a few people come along who really change the course of the music, Cecil Coleman, Anthony Braxton, a few I can think of, Sun Ra.
Sure, yeah. But I mean, there are also other types of players who are not in the spotlight like that, and who have maybe, surely benefited from those persons like that.
Yes.
But they can have maybe even a bigger impact on somebody else's life,
Of course. And none of us know what kind of an impact we're having on anyone else's life. None of us can know that. The greatest gift I think anyone can give to the world is to truly be themselves, because that also allows other people and inspires other people, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Also
not musicians. I mean, it's not. That's a lesson, not also on a musical level, but that can be true for somebody who owns a bakery or, whatever.
Of course, I think you can't separate it. I see a lot of what's happening in the modern world as, it's a struggle to get to the top, and everybody wants to be the best and make the most money and be noticed and all of this. There are so many different aspects of that too, because there are a lot of people doing things who don't get noticed. So some of it is luck, or being in the right place at the right time, knowing people who know people. There is that aspect. Early on, I remember I thought, okay, I want to play with this person and that person, and I want people to hear me and notice me and all these kinds of things. Now, in a way, I care much less about that. Like if someone lives in a small town somewhere where a lot of people internationally are not going to hear them for whatever reason, that doesn't make what they're doing any less significant or important. And I remember it was always a thing, you have to go to New York, you have to be in New York. Right. That's the only place where it really matters. And that's changed a lot. I mean, there are people who don't live in New York, who don't want to live in New York,
Right, yeah.
And also in Europe over the years, I've noticed much more of a situation where the local musicians are being included more. And it used to always be about having American musicians come over to play at the festivals. And now I think there is much more importance placed on the European musicians themselves and their music.
Don't you think, through Corona and the whole pandemic situation, it's going to become even more local? Because right now, I've been in that situation right now where I got called from clubs where I wanted to get a gig for a long time or come back there or whatever. And now I get a call, they ask me like, okay, so-and-so is not able to come from the US, so we have a gig for you, don't you want to play? So in a way, we also benefited from that, and it became a little bit more, especially in those last months, even became a little bit more local. And I can see a time, maybe during this pandemic, where you can only listen to certain people either through the internet or being in the same city like that. Which has its upsides, I'd say,
Yes, I was just saying to somebody that one of the positive things I think to come out of all this is that even when unrestricted live music comes back, even then, I think it's going to really change how music happens, because in a live concert, I think many places at the same time will stream the concert. So there will be a live audience and it will be streamed, because for streaming concerts, there's often 1,000, 2,000 people who will be watching that from all over the world. But if you're playing a live concert and that's not happening, maybe you'll have 100, 200 people in a club or whatever. So I think one way that's changed things is that it's going to become much more available. Music is going to become much more available on a worldwide scale. I think that's a good thing. But talking about the local music again, over the past years, the local concerts that I've played have become much more important to me. They're deeply meaningful.
Right.
Because I'm playing for people in my community, and I can reach the same depth that I can if I'm up on a stage somewhere in Europe at a festival and there's 1,000 people. It's still getting into that space.
Totally, yeah.
Into that space.
And it's it's your contribution to the community also.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's similar to maybe back in the day when we started out, and you would play for local friends who don't know about the music, and also maybe your family, and that could sometimes even scare you more. I mean, scare me more if somebody is like not an expert of this music and didn't come for his interest in the club or whatever. He came for you because you know, that can be more involving and more challenging in a way.
Yes, much scarier in a way.
Yes.
I'm much more nervous playing in my town than internationally. Much more nervous because internationally I feel like, well, people are coming because they know something about the music and they'll be on the same page a little bit. They'll understand. Whereas when I play in my hometown, they're also coming because they're my friends. They might not know anything about the music. They might feel freaked out, like, what is that? Oh my God, you know, is that music?
Yeah.
And then I have to see them on the street the next day, you know, at the post office or something.
Yeah.
So that's definitely scarier. Definitely scarier.
But also I'm asking, or I'm wondering, as you get older, does this situation, it changes because you're craving that a little bit more maybe to get into that kind of exchange between the locals and the not the experts of this music.
Yeah. Well, that was the case for me. That was the case for me. I like to think as you get older, maybe you get a little less selfish also. Maybe when I was studying classical music, when I was still, you know, 15 or 16 years old, and my teacher would talk to me about teaching, and I would always say, I don't want to teach. I want to play, you know.
Yeah.
Or teaching is for people who can't be successful playing this. I still hear people saying that. And she said to me, well, you're still young and selfish.
Ooh, yeah.
And in fact, the teaching residencies that I've done these past years are some of the most profound and wonderful experiences I've ever had, even more so than playing.
Tell me why.
Because of what develops between me and the people in the workshops. You know, I won't even call them students. I'll call them participants.
Right.
Because many of them, you know, play better than I do all kinds of things on a professional level. So in some of the cases where, one case in particular, in Florida a few years ago, there was a 3-week residency at an arts center, Atlantic Center for the Arts. And there were 9 participants. And we all lived, you know, on these grounds together, and we went to the beach together. We were close to the national seashore. We went to Mexican restaurants and had meals together. We played together. We talked about our work. We made projects together. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I felt like we had become so close. We had become like a family. And we've stayed in touch, and I continue to play with some of those people, or they come to visit. If they go to New York, they come up to Woodstock, which is 2 hours away from New York City, and we visit, and we'll spend the day together. And I still feel in a way like kind of responsibility toward them. Like when you take on some teaching work, for me anyway, I feel like I take on a responsibility to those people, and for the rest of my life, I will feel that about those people, that they can come to me and ask me for help or whatever, forever.
Yeah,
know?
That's beautiful. Because I mean, the most negative example of that is a teacher who's going to teach the student no matter who's sitting in front of them. You know, and there are those teachers as well who have their system and who will go about the system, and maybe it'll work. But it's a very, you can exchange any student and it will be the same experience, more or less. That can generate a great musician, maybe. And it sure has at some points, but this is a more personal approach and a very, very engaging approach, I think.
Well, it's an approach that works with improvisation. And I can see there could have to be other approaches where there is a system or a technique that someone has to learn. If you want to build a chair, and you just improvise that, on the floor. So somebody has to tell you, this is the way you do it, like this, like that. If you want to learn to play Western classical music, somebody has to tell you, this is major scale, this is a minor scale, this moves from this key to that key, and things like that. The interpretation is something else. When you're working with improvisation, which is what I do, or with the relationship between improvisation and composition, or thinking compositionally, or sensing with a compositional sense, when you're improvising, that is much less clear-cut. And I always feel like each person has their way, and a lot of what I do is just explore their way with them, and maybe make suggestions, come up with exercises and ideas, to try things. Comes right down to it, when you're actually playing, you can't be thinking and strategizing about all that stuff.
Right.
It's there. It's there. It's not like you suddenly become mindless. But it's not like you're practicing an exercise,
But I mean, you're talking about it's there, but how does it get there?
Well, it gets there by practicing, or it's like you have to have enough technique on your instrument to be able to do what you want to do. So I don't want to play Chopin etudes. I like them, but that's not what I want to do, so I'm not working on that.
Right.
And if I were working on that, I could do it, but it's not what I'm choosing, where I'm choosing to focus my attention,
right.
or my work, my energy. I don't know, there is a lot of study and practice involved, I think, in listening to what other people have done and analyzing what they've done and how they've done it. And it reminds me a little bit, when I first got into jazz and improvised music, it was magic to me. It was like Adam and Eve in the garden,
right.
Magic. And then when I started studying, I had already studied music theory in the classical world, but when I started studying extended music theory in the jazz world and working very methodically to learn these things, ninths, 11th, 13th, flat 5, all this stuff that I never really dealt with in classical theory and harmony, a little bit, but not to that extent. I had to really, really study that and different progressions, 2-5-1s in major and minor, and practice those for years until they became internalized to the point where if someone wants me to play a tune or a composition with chord changes in it, I can do that. In other words, I want to be able to do things. I don't want to be limited.
Yeah.
And also playing with people. There is just playing And then if you're working in say, an improvisation workshop, there might be things like certain ideas or exercises that people suggest, or even listening exercises, or doing a particular thing, or, okay, let's just play trills, different tempos, different tones, and everybody just do that for 5-10 minutes and see what happens. Make this tapestry of just trills. There are so many, things that you can do. But then when you're on the stage playing, it's more like, for me, like I'm in a kind of ceremonial space, a sacred space. It's not that space where I'm practicing something and everything. It involves the energy of the room or the space itself, of the people listening, the people you're playing with. It's very complex. And to just allow yourself to absorb the complexity of that energy and relate to it in an instinctual way that is still informed by all your intellect and experience, but which you are not. That's what I mean when I say it's there.
Yeah.
It's there, but you're not using it to control the situation at that time.
Right. That's a beautiful explanation. Do you sometimes have, because we talked about that thing of thoughts coming, is there an upside sometimes, or has there been instances where a thought was actually beneficial to the music? A thought, an intellectual thought like that?
Well, some ideas will come floating through, but I find that a lot of that also tends to slow down.
Right.
The response. So, I don't know. Have you had that experience?
Sometimes. Sometimes I use thoughts as getting me out of my comfort zone, in terms of, okay, I'm only going to play fourths from now on. And that from now on is very flexible, meaning it will only last until I'm back in the zone. Yeah. It's usually, I feel like, okay, I'm lost here. I'm at a loss for ideas. I only play as if I only would have one hand, but I have two hands. But this is one hand or whatever. Yeah. And then I get another idea from that, which will take me out of that. So this is kind of something, an example where I felt like a thought like that, an intellectual thought like that, can have a benefit for the growth of the music, maybe when you're feeling stuck or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's stupid to make rules and say, well, it has to be like this or it has to be like that. Obviously, again, it's very complex and a lot of things will be happening. One other thing that I do these days, if I don't hear anything or I don't have an idea, I don't play in that moment, at least in an ensemble, So it's like these situations where you feel forced to say something to hold up your end of the conversation.
Right.
But you don't really have anything to say at that moment. So as Miles Davis said to John Coltrane, I think it was,
take the horn out of your mouth.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. You probably know the story better than I do.
I think we're talking about the same story, and it makes total sense as an example for that. But you just said you were doing this or doing this more these days. That's a thought that I had when I was listening to all of your records. Like, she's playing when she has something to say, and there are pauses where I feel like, that thought or that idea or that breath came to an end. Especially, actually, and this is something I really want to talk to you about, that trio with Gary Peacock and Paul Motian.
Yeah.
That sense of camaraderie and communion is really deep. I mean, is really, really deep in this trio. I mean, it runs through all of your projects, but wow, you and those guys, that's a special bond. And I was really touched today. I was listening to that record again, that record of Annette Peacock's music. And I was today I was reading through the sheet music of her pieces. And I think I might have even a couple of your sheets through Frank Kimbrough. And so I was reading along and how you guys interpreted those melodies. And there were instances where you were sharing the melodies with Gary. It's hard for me to put into words, but I assume there was little stuff talked about who's going to do whatever. But it seems like you're all following this thread, and then it's like he's covering 3 notes of the melody, and you just take on right after that, and it seems like it's like, oh, you got this, okay, I'll be back in a second or whatever. It's very, very, very much in the moment, but also very, nobody's like saying stuff like, okay, this is mine now, taking the stage or whatever, taking the spotlight. It's like, okay, this is the music, and I'm going to add here or take away here, but it's all, this is going and we're adding to it or whatever.
Yeah. But that's something in the Anthony Braxton Quartet that I learned, that it's about the music, and what you do is in service to the music. It's not yes, people have solo spots and all this, but it's not about, okay, this is what I can do, and, I'm great, and I play better than so-and-so, and listen to this. It's not about any of that. Sometimes, it's just somebody's turn to be heard, in that way. But if it doesn't fit the music, then it doesn't belong there.
There's no point, yeah.
But on the recording of Annette's music, I mean, there were a lot of arrangements there. So I don't remember particularly the piece that you're talking about, but there were a lot of arrangements, but in the actual improvisation, nobody was told what to do.
Right.
Anything like that. Yeah.
How was it for you to study her music and to play it with those guys who have such a deep relationship with her? I don't know about your relationship to her. I didn't really find anything about that, but maybe you can tell me about what your relationship to her and her music is. She
moved to Woodstock in the late 90s, and I got her phone number and I called her because I had been listening to, I guess it must have been Paul Bley, playing a piece of hers called Gesture Without Plot. And I really, really loved that piece.
So beautiful.
So, I transcribed it off the recording, and I called her because I wanted to find out if the transcription was okay. And we became friends. We would hang out together, and I liked her music very much because, as far as I'm aware, she was self-taught. Her mother, I think, played in a symphony orchestra. Anyway, so she was exposed to a lot of the same kinds of music that I was, and yet she was married to Paul Bley, so she had this whole other side, and she wrote a lot of music for him, and she was married to Gary before that, so she was also exposed to jazz. And her compositions, for me, are very unique. They're like a synthesis between all of these influences. And at a certain point, I just suggested to her, I said, I'd like to make a recording of your compositions, and I was going to do it solo. And she said, well, Gary lives not too far from here. In fact, he lived about an hour and a half away. And should I ask him if he'd like to play? So he said yes, and then I thought, well, if it's piano and bass, maybe I should ask Paul, because Paul and I had played duos and trios over the years.
Right.
And I was very ignorant of history at that point. I never even realized they had played together, other famous groups and all this. It's just Annette knew Gary, I knew Paul, and I thought, oh, hey, that's a good combination. and I suggested it to Manfred Eicher, and he wanted to do it. And then Annette and I worked very much on the interpretations of her pieces, so much so that I suggested she come to Oslo to the recording session and conduct.
Wow.
Because she was very, very particular about so many aspects of the music, when it was louder or quieter or getting a little faster and then a little slower. So she conducted everything. And
that's so interesting. Wow.
Yes, that's how that worked.
What would she, what kind of notes would she give you in terms of, was this a good take or whatever, or go in certain directions also, or what would her input be like?
It was more about just conducting, she wanted a lot of things much slower than I played them at first. It had to be much slower.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of space. She would make certain suggestions, like, okay, if you're going to play these lines and all this stuff, leave breaths between them, leave spaces, things like that. It was really an incredible experience working with her, and a privilege. We're not in touch these days, unfortunately, but that's how it is.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, what a special way to write also. I mean, I think at a certain point, I think she, I think it was in an interview or an article I read, she didn't really have a great technique on the piano, so this is why she wrote most of those pieces, at least, mostly two-part harmony, but wow, what kind of colors she gets out of the piano. I mean, out of music with those two voices.
And I think all of her music is basically songs. Like, she's basically writing things that she would say.
Right.
And not all the pieces we played had the lyrics available to me, but they were there somewhere. And they were all things that I think she would sing at some point or other. And I think that really shows in her music, the feeling of each piece.
Yeah. Yeah, she was able to give every piece a very, very distinct vibe right from the start. You're in a zone.
Yeah.
There was one day when I was only listening to Dreams, her recording with Gary Peacock and Paul Bley and I think Barry Altschul, right? Mm-hmm. Such a mysterious piece. And I so love that she joined you for exactly that piece on the record. Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of floats.
Totally. There's a different section on Dreams that I hadn't heard before. The end, there's like a different tag or whatever. It's not on the other recording that I know.
It's just the music she gave me.
Huh.
I think it's Paul Bley who actually wrote down the compositions. I don't think she wrote them down. I think she played them
Ah, okay. I was going to ask you, like, how does her sheet music look like? I mean, how does she write things down? But
Yeah, it's just regular notated music, but I don't think it was written by her.
mm,
Actually written by her.
I see.
Yeah. I was thinking about something else because we're talking about Annette and space and silence, and we were talking about space before, leaving space,
Right.
and not just playing all the notes you can. But the other side of that is that the space and the silence can have as much intensity as the energy playing. It's a
Right.
different kind of intensity. It's just the other side of that. And that if you just like lose your space in that and your focus in that, then it's like you're just falling asleep. So you can't lose it. It's like it has its own momentum, its own sense of going somewhere. Yeah, it's not just static space.
It has a movement in itself.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, or it's like if you're having a conversation with somebody and you just space out and then you can't remember what you were talking about or something, So, or if you're really listening to what the other person is saying, like if you're really there.
You get lost sometimes in what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
Listening so hard that you at some point maybe don't hear the words or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that you kept that trio and did another recording with them. The Amaryllis recording is also so beautiful.
Thanks.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the process of that trio, how that trio was working?
We just brought in compositions. I mean, a lot of the compositions were Paul's. He wrote a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Gary and I wrote hardly anything. So a lot of the music was Paul's. And I remember during that recording session, Manfred came into the room and he said, I'd like you to try some free improvisations with a ballad feeling. And I remember up until that point, I always thought free improvisation, that's not something, that's like a ballad or has these more traditional harmonies and all that kind of thing. And then he said, free is free.
Right.
Free. Anything. And that was a huge revelation to me. And Gary started playing this very simple repeating line through a whole piece, which ended up becoming Amaryllis. And that line didn't change. It was just da-da-dum, bum, 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 da-da-dum, over and over and over. And then I just started playing this melody that I ended up writing down afterwards because it sounded like a written melody. But I remember at first when he started playing that, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And then that just happened, that just happened.
That's improvising in a compositional way, right? That's having that compositional sense.
Well, when I talk about a compositional sense, I'm really talking about more than that, I think. I'm talking about how things go from one place to another, how they fit together, the path that they're taking. and also in terms of different instruments, different orchestral textures and sounds, and not everyone playing at the same time. What happened with Amaryllis, that's not what I meant by thinking compositionally, although it was like a composition that just came, that was almost there. It was just there. I wasn't trying to make it up.
Yeah.
But in the sense that you're talking about, yeah, that's improvising
a song in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering also how you worked on accessing or maybe also giving into all the aspects of your personality.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because certain players, they might be, I don't know, they always go into the same mold of dynamics, of mood, of density or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're capable of creating beautiful music like that. Mm-hmm. But there are other players like yourself also creating beautiful music, but it seems like you're more open. You're giving more to the table by I think you talked about before, like showing yourself, or mm-hmm. This is who I am, and therefore you're able to go into all kinds of aspects of your personality.
Well, they say that there is fear and there's love. And if you're in fear, it's hard to be in love. So if you're afraid of showing your true feelings, your true music, whatever it is, then you are not going to be doing it with love. You're going to be doing it in fear of how people are going to judge it, and how you're going to judge it yourself. So part of that is maybe working on letting go of fear, letting go. I remember asking Gary Peacock one time, do you get nervous before you play a concert? Because I always do.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Or maybe nervous isn't exactly the word, but it's like this kind of nervous energy, or, gathering your energy, but also how's it going to go? And am I going to screw this up? Or so-and-so is going to be in the audience. What are they going to think of this piece? Are they going to think it's too romantic, or blah, blah, blah? All these things are going through your head. And so it's a discipline. It's a discipline of saying, okay, stop.
Right.
Because what you want is to be in a space where you are being your best and truest self through the music. I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, but
go ahead. That's fine.
When we're talking about being open, I mean, there have been many times where I would be playing with people and I would hear things going in a certain direction, like, oh, this is what should happen next, or, they should be playing, this has happened often. Oh, okay, they should be playing a fast time feeling so that I can improvise these free bebop kind of lines on top of that. But then they don't do it. They play a piece up. And for a few minutes, I'll try to force the music in that direction. Never works. It does not work.
Yeah.
So part of it is just being open to going with where the music is going, taking you. And it may not be where you're feeling or your mind was expecting it to go, you know. So yeah,
Totally.
just that. And it's different with everybody you play with. I played in some totally free improvisation sessions where the people did not want me to play modal, anything modal. They stopped. They said, I feel paralyzed when you go into that thing, you know. So
Wow.
I had to find, in those situations, another way to relate to the music that was happening, you know.
Yeah, but how do you find a way then to relate to what's inside you, or maybe you wait.
I wait for an idea to come. I just
I'm asking if somebody's like giving you a note like that. Okay, don't go anywhere, any modal or tonality or whatever. But what happens when you then hear something like that? When you have an idea like that?
I respect the context that I'm playing in. So, you know, yeah, because certain groups have an aesthetic, and it kind of wouldn't make sense if I'm going to play with those groups. It wouldn't make sense to suddenly start playing something else. When I was playing Anthony Braxton's music and it came time for me to play a solo, it wouldn't have made sense musically or aesthetically to suddenly, you know, go into a Chopin etude or you know, some stride piano thing or whatever. It wouldn't have belonged in that particular context,
right.
you know. So also being sensitive to contexts of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I play with a lot of different people, and I like doing that. And what I can do in each context is different. It's different.
It comes from the context is also created through the personalities, not only the musical personalities, but the persons themselves. They create a context before any note is played.
Of course. I remember playing with one musician when I knew that these people were like, well, I knew where their tastes lie.
Yeah.
And I had been feeling like playing some more romantic, you know, music. And I actually asked their permission. I said, would you feel uncomfortable if I did this during the concert? And they said, no, it's okay, you know. But I kind of felt like I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to do it, you know. Because I respected who they are and what their aesthetic is. And I guess it's a kind of adaptability. I see it as a kind of adaptability because there are a lot of different things I do that I relate to that are all parts of who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be all those things every moment.
Right. Not at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's like going into a different culture, a different country, and respecting that culture, you know, and adapting to that. You're still yourself, but you're respecting the whole context. Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a very, yeah, as you said, with the cultures of a different country, I mean, that's a very, again, it can be applied for also non-musical situations, just, basic life situations.
Yes. The first time I went to New Zealand, I was playing with a group of young musicians from New Zealand, and we were spending some time at a marae, place where the concerts were going to happen and where ceremonies would happen. And the person who was in charge of the marae sent us a list of things we should and should not do. And for instance, some of the things we should not do, one of the things was don't sit on the table, right?
Okay.
I mean, would you do that anyway? But maybe some people would, you know?
Sure. It has happened.
Yeah, because they wanted to be sure that we did not do that. Mm-hmm. So it's good to know these things, you know, sometimes in advance too.
But then also, I mean, in musical situations, it can also be nice if cultures clash, or if extremes work together and create something that is becomes its own thing or becomes its own culture in a way.
Yeah, that's actually one compositional idea. My first trio that I put together for my first tour in Europe in the 1980s with Billy Bang, Peter Kowald, John Betch. I particularly chose those people because they were very different. Like Peter was totally kind of European free improv. And Billy Bang had a background in blues and jazz and all this, also improvising. And John did everything. And I wanted that, I don't know if you would call it a clash or just like juxtaposing different contexts. That's something I love to do, actually. I love to do. Yeah.
And also, even if we don't talk about what is expected of you or what is appropriate for kind of a context, that's what happens naturally every time, right? I mean, it's always a clash. It's always a mixture of things when you put one and one together.
Of course. It's never going to be exactly the way you envision it or the way you want it, unless it's your project and you're being the leader and saying that. Even when I play solo piano, it's not always the way I want it. The ideas I think I want to play, sometimes it doesn't work out and I have to do something else. Or maybe the piano isn't good or, you know, not responding the way I want. Or maybe the audience isn't responding the way I want. You know, or maybe my shoulder hurts or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah.
Isn't that, I mean, for me, it's the scariest thing to play solo. Because you have nobody to, there's nobody to, when I listen to you play with Gary and Paul, there's so many moments where you just leave Gary and Paul for themselves, especially in bass solos. And there's no moment where you can really do something like that, you know, in playing solo. Of course you can stop playing, but in a way like, okay, you guys, you've got it now, you know. Or, I like that idea. I'm going to play something on top of that or use that idea for myself. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you can play mind games with yourself.
Well, but on the other hand, you're totally free. You're totally free.
Absolutely.
And you can do exactly what you need to do without considering if someone else is going to go with you or not want to do that or whatever, you know. Like in that situation, it's like you're flying solo. And I actually love that. I love both. I need both.
Mm.
I need both situations
Yeah.
to have balance.
I mean, you sound very much at ease at playing solo, and you're creating so much beautiful music. I was listening to Vignettes the other day. What a beautiful album. And also the sound you get out of the instrument. That's actually something that I'm wondering also about sound production. The basic way you're sitting at the piano, how you get that sound out of the instrument.
I don't know. I don't know. I know there are different piano techniques. I know there's a Russian piano technique, special Russian technique that a lot of people have studied, but I don't know. And maybe it's something with the relationship with the instrument, with the piano. You know, because sometimes there is a piano that for me just doesn't have any soul or depth.
Mm.
You know, and I find it very hard to work with those pianos or to feel inspired, actually, when I'm playing them.
Yeah. What do?
I just make the best of it. What can you do? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a sweet spot to every piano. And no matter how banged up it is, there's, but it's especially harder to get it on a just an instrument that's in bad shape or wasn't treated right.
Yeah. Well, Paul Bley liked to have weird pianos. He would actually use those problem places in his improvisations. Mm. If you had a key that sticks or something like that, something like a strange out of tune note, he would use all that. Mm. It was like a challenge to him. I just remember.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
An extreme example. I remember playing a piano in Washington D.C. once at some festival, solo, and the tops of the keys were coming off as I played. And it was ridiculous, totally ridiculous. So after the concert, a woman came up to me and she was so proud and she said, "How did you like the piano? I donated this piano to the concert hall." And I said, "Well, here's keys." I try not to be rude, but
sure, yeah.
I guess they didn't use the right glue or something. I don't know.
Wow.
Another time the pedal came off the piano in London after 5 minutes, and I had to ask the audience if anyone knew how to attach the pedal, and some guy came running up from the audience and lay down underneath the piano and put the pedal back, and everybody thought, "Oh, that was so amazing that she." But what else could I do? I had to ask if somebody knew how to fix this. Yes,
I mean that takes courage in a moment like that to really. It's not adjusting to the situation. It's like giving into the situation and be like, okay, this is what it is. I need help.
I thought it was funny.
Yes, and it connects you to the audience in another way.
Yeah.
And how was the concert after that?
I think it was okay. I remember the part where the pedal came off the piano.
Yeah. I guess you're not gonna remember. How do you say? What's the word? Forget that. Yeah.
No, never.
Do you listen to recordings of yourself and record yourself a lot in concerts and go back and listen to them?
No. Sometimes I do. I know that that's a very good practice to listen to yourself and hear certain things about the way you play that maybe you want to focus on improving or something. So yes, I've done some of that, but maybe I'll listen once and then I'll be so traumatized I'll never listen to it again or something. Because, yeah, I tend to be judgmental after the fact, and I always hear what I could have done differently or maybe should have done differently or something.
Yeah.
So those recordings are frozen in time. I never wanted to record at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I like of the music just going off into the ether and just traveling indefinitely. I never wanted to freeze it into a recording, but what got me into playing this music to begin with was a John Coltrane recording. So it's not that I'm against recording.
Right.
I just think it is difficult. It's like looking at photos of yourself or videos or listening to your voice, which doesn't sound the same as it sounds to you.
Yes.
Because it's inside the cavity of your head, but somebody listening to you, your voice sounds different. So it's a little hard for me anyway. It's hard for me.
That's a great analogy. I mean, now having done a lot of interviews, I get used to how my voice sounds, but in the beginning or as a kid or whatever, like this is how I sound like, and I've had this feeling also when I listen to myself, but I've recorded myself a lot, so I also got used to that a little bit more.
I mean, my voice, when I listen to a recording of my voice, it sounds much more nasal than it does to me. It doesn't sound the same.
Yeah, it's not inside you. You're giving it, and then it's all, in a way, like the music, it's not yours anymore. It belongs to the situation, to the context, or to whoever is hearing it. It's like also when people come up to you after a concert. Who did I talk to about this? It's like, I mean, we all have had this situation where you after a gig, you stand at the bar or whatever, somebody is coming up to you and saying, "That was so beautiful," and you're like, "No, it wasn't. I had a bad night," or whatever.
I don't do that anymore, ever, because then you're ruining the experience for that person.
Totally, yes.
I would just say thank you. I might think, oh, that was a terrible night, or, I just couldn't make it happen, or whatever. But if somebody else had an experience with that, I don't want to ruin that for them.
Absolutely.
Just have to be willing to let go of it,
That's why I said it. I think it's the same with your voice. Once it's outside of your body, it's not yours anymore. I mean, it is still your voice, but it's a different thing how it then arrives at the ear of somebody else. And also I try to get better at that, a little bit hide your feelings after the gig. But also maybe because of that, maybe I always felt better after a gig in the dressing room, being in the dressing room, as opposed to talking to the people. But now I feel like I want to get out and talk to the people more, actually.
Yeah.
Because we're sitting in the dressing room the whole time right now.
Yeah, exactly. Permanent dressing room. But, I always need a little space. I need space before I play, because if somebody tries to talk to me very soon before I play, I'll hear their voice, but it goes in one ear and out the other. I don't even process what they're saying, because I'm mentally preparing to be in this other space. And right after the concert, I'm still in that space, and I need just a little time to transition out of it,
Yes.
Before I talk to people. But then I want to talk.
Yeah. That is nice to meet people and say hi and, of course.
Yeah, people always say, oh, I was too shy to come back. And I always think, oh, what a shame, because I would love to meet people afterwards and talk with them,
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of promoters do that a lot, come and talk to you right before you go on stage about the last person who played this gig. Or, last time it was a little bit more crowded. Today it's a little bit...
That's just completely insensitive. Sorry.
Yes.
People can say very stupid things. I remember I played a solo concert once somewhere that I felt very, very good about, and went out for dinner afterwards with some of the promoters and people. And one of them said, I really like your trio playing better.
Okay, yeah.
And I thought, should I kill you now or later?
I mean, that's a skill set to deal with situations like that. That's a special skill set, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a basic sensitivity,
Yes, but people, I mean, for us as musicians, you need a special kind of skill set to deal with these type of situations on top of dealing with everything else and the music and the business side of things.
Yeah, they call it having a thick skin.
Right.
I've had to develop a very thick skin.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How did you do that?
I just said I am not going to show this person how what they just said is affecting me. I'm just going to be cool. That's all.
Right. Wow. I really like your trio playing better.
Well, I forget exactly the words. It was something like, it was a good concert, but I really like your trio playing. Or I think you sound best in a trio. Something like that. And I was feeling kind of so high and on top of the world, I just felt like I gave everything, and then like this person just gave their journalistic opinion or whatever, and that was not the right time to say it. Really, I don't think.
I want to picture how you go about composing, where you find inspiration to compose, and what your process is composing. I mean, I'm sure there's different types of processes, but maybe you can take me through a couple. Okay,
sometimes I'll be in a certain mood, and I'll sit down at the piano and start playing. And if I come up with something I like, I'll start writing it down, and then I'll look for, and then I'll try some other things that might sound good connected to what I wrote down.
Yeah.
That happens more with the ballad kind of things. Then other times I'll actually use some systems, like I tend to write lines using a 12-tone system, but not totally strict. If I don't like something, I'll change it. Like what you said earlier about you have an idea, but if that's not working, then you'll change it. And I'll tend to write, especially if I'm writing pieces for ensembles. I call them cells. And it will be a particular musical figure or rhythm that can be improvised on, So I'll write down these small cells of ideas and then use them as a basis for improvisation.
It makes me think of that first song on, what's the name? Patterns.
Yeah, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have a hard time composing, because if it doesn't feel really true to me, I don't like it. Like, okay, I could sit down and write out a bunch of lines and different pieces, but if they're not coming from a deep place in me. They don't resonate with me, and I don't really want to play them, you know, or they don't feel honest. That's just me, you know. But I think I have a type of brain that works better with improvisation. If you give me an idea, I can take off on that and make a whole thing out of it. But if I have to sit down and write something, it's like my brain resists that. It's an actual, you know, people's brains are configured in different ways. You know, somebody can look at something and draw it, you know, or hear a piece of music and play it and that kind of thing.
Right.
I struggle with composition, you know, so I haven't actually written a lot.
I really love your compositions.
Oh, thank you.
Goodbye is another one that is on that duo record that is so so beautiful. I would like to see how this is written down. I'm always curious how people write down their music, because it tells you something about what is important to them and how they think of other musicians reading them.
I just recently, my friend Chris Davis, who teaches at Berkeley.
I talked to her.
Yeah, she started a digital library of women composers, and which she asked me to contribute things to. So I went back and looked at a lot of my scores, you know, and I rewrote them all so that they could be played by other people, you know, and I changed certain things, took away some things, added some things. I was very happy she asked me to do that because I resisted. I didn't really want to, but it was a very good thing. So Goodbye is one of the pieces in there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What a great project of Chris.
Yeah, she's doing great things there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in general, she's doing great things.
Yeah.
When was the first time you heard her?
I heard her at a Vision Festival years ago in Brooklyn, playing with Andrew Cyril, and I don't remember the other person or people in a trio. And I remember being intrigued by her even back then, you know. And then I didn't hear anything for a long time, and then suddenly she won all those awards for Diatom ribbons, and I thought, I'm going to check this out. And I checked it out, and I really liked it. And somehow we were in contact, and I asked her if she would send me the score, or asked her how she wrote certain pieces. She sent me all the scores.
Oh, great.
And the CD and everything.
It's a beautiful record, right? A special record.
Yeah, it's amazing. Especially the title piece and other piece that Esperanza sings.
Oh, yeah.
Which I saw on YouTube, actually. I kind of discovered it on YouTube.
Isn't that the Michael Attias piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a video of them rehearsing that, you know.
Yeah.
Which is, I said, wow, okay. I'm going to check this out. So, yeah, since then, I mean, we've become friends, and Chris has come up to Woodstock with her son Benji, who's 7, and yeah.
What do you like about her playing? Can you maybe go into detail?
Well, I like it. I resonate to it, and I think it's very intelligent playing. It's a perfect example of compositional improvising. Yeah. She's a good composer. I like her ideas. I like her playing. I don't know. It's hard to put these things into words. You know, why like something or don't. Yeah.
Something, I'm sorry for asking, sometimes there's also loses its mystique maybe also. If you put a stamp on it. This is what I like about this person, and
Oh, you know what? I realized I totally didn't finish a thought that I had started much earlier on when I was talking about first getting into improvised music and jazz, and it was like magic. Remember?
Yeah.
Eve in the garden and
Yes.
everything. And then when I studied for 2 years with a teacher in Boston, jazz theory and harmony and transcribing a lot of pieces, all kinds of things. And at that point, it lost its magic for me. It's like, oh, this is just really a drag, and But then the third phase was you internalize all that stuff. That's where this was going way back then.
Yes.
You internalize all of that, and suddenly the magic is back.
Yeah.
But back with a different dimension of
depth.
You hear all these things and you understand what you're hearing, but it doesn't take away from the magic.
Yeah. Totally.
And our conversation started to go somewhere else, so I kind of lost, the completion of that.
Thank you for getting back to that, because that's something that I've experienced as well, in terms of, because I transcribe a lot of songs, or I transcribe a lot of moments that I like. Never was really into transcribing solos or something, but songs, yes, a lot of songs I transcribe, and little moments like a voicing, a line or a texture or whatever. And the first thing is always like, first thought is always, oh, that's what it is. Okay. It's kind of a letdown sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you go back to that section, and then you listen to it with that knowledge now, and with that, what's about to happen, and then it takes, you have to get back to it, but in a certain different, it has to grow a little bit on you, or it has to take its time. You have to take the time and then get back to it.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, the magic comes back.
Yeah. It's like when Chris sent the score for Diatom Ribbons, because I was really curious, how did she put that piece together? And I said, oh, that's what it was. Okay, that's what she did. Whoa, I thought it was something else, where she put that note. She put it at the beginning of the measure. I thought it was somewhere else. That's interesting, all this. And then I listened to it with the score, and then I thought, okay, I just needed to see those things together, but that's it. Now I can go back to listening to the piece, and it's still as great as ever,
Yeah, and also, how about it if you go back to it in a year or 2 years, and you will have forgotten about how the sheet music looks, but still there is something deep inside you that will stay there, of that experiences of getting closer to something, and then stepping back again.
Exactly. I mean, I do a lot of things in my music ensembles with overlaying, like simultaneous things, as opposed to one person is playing solo, the other person is playing, just accompanying you or supporting you. It's more of a collective thing. And when I am putting together structured improvisations or compositions for groups, I use that concept a lot. And that, when I first listened to that piece, Diatom Ribbons, I heard something like that, all these overlays. Oh, that's so cool. And then I saw how she wrote it. And that was interesting to see, how she wrote it, because it sounds so spontaneous, kind of.
What are other things that you've discovered lately that touched you in a similar or different way, but things that are interesting you right now that you are checking out?
There is a Norwegian hardanger fiddle player named Benedict Maurse. And she's done some beautiful recordings, some for ECM. So I listen to her. I love Scandinavian music and a cappella vocal music. What else am I listening to? At the moment, to be honest, I am not listening to a lot. It's kind of, but well, I tend to not listen a lot anyway. First of all, I can't just put something on and then once it's playing, I have to listen and sort of figure out what's going on and that kind of thing. And so it's not really relaxed. It's like work in a way, good work, but work. So
you can't do anything while you're listening to the music, or it's hard for you to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it can almost make me feel agitated,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to figure out what they were doing, how did they do it,
Yeah.
What line they just played, and then I'll go back and play it over and over until I can understand what they were doing. So if I'm going to just put music on, it has to be something that's not going to affect me that way.
Yeah.
Basically.
I see. Another subject that I'm always interested in is how people deal with periods of self-doubt and self-criticism, which is, I think, a constant for us as artists.
Yeah.
And we've also already touched on that a little bit, but I mean, I've had certain periods where I've been very, very self-critical and even denying certain things that I can do by putting myself down and saying, I can't do it anymore, I can't do it, or and then I get out of it and I usually notice, okay, I was on the brink of a new step, a new plateau. But when you're in there, you never notice it. You never remember it. But I think or suspect that we as artists, we have different kinds of approaches of getting out of this zone.
Yeah. Sometimes what happens to me is I just retreat and just don't play for a certain period of time. I mean, this whole pandemic, I almost didn't play for 8 months, even here at home,
Wow.
I feel like it. And yeah, many times I'll feel like, okay, I've said everything I have to say, I have nothing else. But that's not true, because your spirit always regenerates. There's always this regeneration. But in order for that to happen, this sounds maybe trite, but in order for the spring to come, there has to be a winter,
Right.
Or it's like when you're playing, if you don't have an idea, you don't say anything. But there are always things happening in your mind that you're not even aware of, because when I come back to playing, there's always new stuff happening. The self-doubt thing, I mean, that's just an ego thing. And I mean, there is constructive listening to see things that you feel you'd like to change or a different direction you'd like to go in. But the complete self-doubt thing, that's like doubting yourself. You're probably imagining the judgments of other people who you hold in esteem. Or maybe you just don't feel inspired. And then again, for me, that's always a good space to just go into the space and the silence and not try to force stuff and not judge myself, I mean, nobody is going to feel inspired all the time. I don't think.
Yeah. I suppose that's true, yes.
And I think we all have those periods of self-doubt and a lot of self-judgment. You know, that is part of being an artist. But I think it doesn't serve a purpose. I think there's a more constructive way to do things. You know, studying other music or listening to other music, you know, even though I just said I don't listen to a lot of music. I'll study other music, or I'll play Bach, or you know, whatever. Self-doubt, it's just a part of being human.
Yes.
You know, it's a part of relationships too. You know, that we all doubt ourselves. Are we good enough? Do we look good enough? Are we are we boring? I mean, that's another reason I think people are afraid to leave space in music, because they're afraid the audience will get bored. You know, so it's just leave your ego at the door. And if you're feeling self-doubt, okay, I'm feeling self-doubt right now.
You are?
That's what. No. I mean, that's what you would say to yourself. You know, okay, that's what I'm feeling right now is self-doubt. Okay, that's okay. But I have as much right to be here as anyone, to occupy this space as anyone, and just not feeling inspired right now. And that's okay. That's just how I feel right now.
Yeah. Maybe as a last topic, I'm curious about certain moments. I'm sure you have had these as well. Certain concerts you have seen, you have witnessed, where you've learned something specific, or even not specific, but certain concerts that still help you, that still are being played within you, that still resonate with you to this day, that you can in an instant go back to it and have that experience again and get from it what you need from it, and even something else.
Well, maybe the strongest example of that is many years ago, I heard Abdullah Ibrahim, who at that time he went by the name Dollar Brand,
right,
at the Creative Music Studio in Woodstock, New York. He played a solo concert that just affected me so deeply. I mean, his music affects me very, very deeply. And the experience of being there and hearing him personally in this small room, you know, with a small audience, it was like a transmission, very strong transmission. And I don't remember exactly what he played, but I remember the feeling of hearing it. And then more recently, Joe Lovano played a concert up here near Woodstock, and Frank Kimbrough was playing piano. And I felt like I felt very affected by his playing, and that I learned something from listening to him, you know, that I'm integrating into my playing, which had something to do with a kind of simplicity and a use of the lower part of the piano, which I don't always use as much when I'm playing Joe's music. So I felt like I learned a lot from him that I'm going to take into the future of playing in that group of Joe's. And, you know, not that I'm trying to play like him, but it made me want to expand the dimensions of what I'd been doing, things like that. But that Dollar Brand concert. That was it for me, you know, the most incredible. What about you?
Well, a lot of special moments and also tiny moments in concerts. I would dare to say it might even never be the whole concert. It might be certain moments that are peaks, or it's like you don't say I'm always happy, or I'm always what's the word in English? Yeah, there's moments of happiness, but you're never happy for the whole time, right?
Yeah. What's the German? Maybe I know it.
Glücklich.
Yeah. Happiness.
Happiness. Okay. Sometimes happy sounds a little bit dull. I don't know why, but just for me because you always, you learn this new language as a teenager. It's always happy birthday or whatever. It sounds like it's a cliche.
But it is kind of happiness. Glücklich.
Yeah.
It's not, to me, it doesn't have the feeling of like a profound, it's a kind of light thing, right, isn't it? Sort of.
Yeah. But also Glück can can be luck, but also it can be something deep and fulfilling. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that it's tiny moments in these concerts that reach a certain deeper part of yourself, the soul, I would say.
Yeah.
And you take something away that will stay there. And I was really touched by what you said about you don't remember the music, but you remember the feeling.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Then I could say a couple other things. Listening to McCoy Tyner play one time in New York at Sweet Basil, a club called Sweet Basil, which I think doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, and I remember I was thinking about going to hear him, and I thought, well, do I need to do that? It's going to be like all these fourth chords and all this stuff I've heard before and everything. But I went, and when I went, I was sitting there and I thought, this is so far beyond fourth chords or whatever it is. It's about his energy, getting back to that again. He was transmitting his energy, and it was so powerful. And I sat there thinking, how arrogant of me, thinking, oh, I've heard this before, and, I don't need to, because I hadn't gotten that energy transmission before. It was so powerful, right, and so beyond just the analysis of what, exactly what he was doing. There was another moment in a Fred Frith concert somewhere at some festival, I think in Finland, and Eva Bitova, the Czech violinist singer Eva Bitova, was singing and playing violin with him, and they did an encore. And she sang the most beautiful, like otherworldly improvisation, very high. And I will always remember that, particular thing that she did. I guess there have been a lot of moments like that, a lot of moments.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still touched, still trying to hold on to what you just said about the Abdullah Ibrahim concert, that you don't remember the music, but you remember the feeling. And isn't that what we as musicians want?
Yeah.
I mean, who cares about fourth chords? Who cares about harmony or melody or whatever? That's something that interests us on a maybe intellectual level, and we like the sound of it.
Yeah.
But still, if it doesn't touch us, or if it doesn't reach us, who cares?
Oh no, I mean, I just recently. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just recently heard a recording of Glenn Gould playing some Bach preludes and fugues, actually.
Yeah.
At somebody's house, and I remember being just so affected by it, you know.
Yeah. And when you said the fourth chord, I mean, when I prepare for these interviews, I listen to the music of that specific person that I have been listening. I've never talked to somebody who I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to be a fan because I'm not a journalist. I have to be a deep admirer, a fan, and I have to be. I have to have other questions that I haven't heard in interviews before because I've listened to a lot of interviews of you. I'm asking you things that I haven't heard before or that are of personal interest to me.
Yeah, those are wonderful questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But why am I saying this? And I wasn't fishing for compliments, by the way. No, the thing was I've listened to a lot of interviews in the past days of you, and you told in a lot of interviews you talked about that experience of listening to A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, and how you were influenced by that music, and also McCoy and there's this record of yours playing John Coltrane's music. But how should I say this? In the Annette Peacock record, I don't remember which tune it was, but there's a certain moment where it reaches a fourth chord. The composition reaches from being two-part harmony to a three-part thing, playing two perfect fourths on top of each other. And it resonated with me in a different level because I had to think of McCoy because of that cliche of we always think of fourth chords when we think of McCoy, although he's so much more than that.
Yeah.
But I could see with all the research that I did or with all the interviews and all I could see in that fourth chord how you play it. I could feel the love for him, although you might have not felt it yourself in that moment, but I can connect it to that, you know.
Yeah. And you know that Coltrane recording, I always say what grabbed me, besides the music, was the spirit that came through, the love, and the spiritual something that came out of that recording and changed my life, basically. Changed my life. So, yeah, I think music has that power. I think the arts have that power. You know, I'm very affected by visual art, and I felt that standing in front of certain pieces of art, and yeah.
I think that's what it comes to. I mean, with all the arts, the memories of it may fade away. I mean, of the content, but the feeling is that what will stay.
Yeah, I have been watching. I'm also very into dance, and I used to work a lot with dancers and play for dance classes and stuff. And I've been watching earlier on in the pandemic. I watched a whole dance festival online from Jacob's Pillow in Massachusetts. And there was a Finnish choreographer, Tero Saarinen. I don't know who knows him, but and he did this like amazing piece about a group called the Shakers in the U.S. I mean, they lived like a very simple life, and the men and women separated, and they didn't have children, so they eventually died out. But you know, and I think like when they would sit in the dining room, they had to have a certain space between each person was like measured out, you know, so many inches between each person, very structured kind of thing. They would hang their chairs up on the wall. Whoa. So the floors were like clear. I don't know, all kinds of interesting things. He did a piece about them that is just so incredible, so incredible. It infected me so deeply. It was so beautiful, you know.
Wow.
So there's so much out there. There's so much. I mean, the human spirit, I think, can be the most beautiful thing and the most awful thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of awful things, especially here, I have to say, you know. But, yeah, it's very interesting. It can be the most terrible and the most beautiful all together.
Right. It's upon each individual to make the decision or to work towards the better aspects of their personality, or work on the not so good aspects of their personality, and then try to contribute.
Yeah, I really do feel, you know, if we can connect with our center, you know, of who we really are as human beings, that those things we don't have to work on as much. We can be aware. We can cultivate being aware of things about ourselves. But, you know, connecting with a deeper aspect of what we are, you know, not who we are even, but what we are. I think the better things will come out of that. I hope. Anyway.
We should all take that to heart, what you just said. And I want to thank you for doing this with me. This has been a great pleasure.